Okay, greetings and welcome to another edition of Ligali Live. I hope you can hear me okay. I know we're running a little later than usual. Be good if anyone can give me a mic check, just let me know that you're picking me up and seeing the picture okay. I think last week the quality seemed to go in really low definition, so it wasn't a really high quality stream. Greetings. Oops, let me mute that. I don't want to have that kind of feedback in. I think we've got the same issue where the quality doesn't seem to be as high as I'd expect it to be. But let me just double check because we're streaming at high definition. But I'm going to go through the news either way. So hopefully you're all okay. And I'm going to get going with the stories. I'll keep an eye on the Facebook chat. Oleander's in the background. We don't have her set up from the Zoom as usual, unfortunately, but if you send a message, she can respond. And I want to get going with the news stories because there's quite a lot of them. And before I start, I want to give a huge thank you out there to Brother Colin, because I have been working throughout this weekend incessantly. And I wouldn't have been able to put together today's program without his support and sending us some of the stories that you're going to hear featured in today's broadcast. So I can't stress how much it's, what's that saying? Teamwork that makes the dream works. So let's go. It's a harrowing one. Unfortunately, it's not been a good couple of weeks. So sit down and get ready. So the first story I'm going to talk about is one that happened literally after we came off broadcast last time. And this is a story about the deaths that took place in Sierra Leone. Don't know if you know, there was a tankard that crashed, and there's 144 bodies that are people who passed away, and there's been a mass funeral for them. We haven't heard much about this story. I haven't certainly heard much about this story, but apparently what happened was that the tanker crashed. It had fuel in it. People came rushing out to see if they could also grab elements of fuel and store it. And this is one of the problems when you have fuel poverty. And there was an explosion, there was a fire, and the disaster just claimed many, many lives. Initially, it was like under 100, it was 100, and now we now know it's up to 144, and it could be even more. So I just wanted to share that story. And again, just sometimes put a spotlight on the fact that we don't actually always know what's going on in our motherlands and around the world, even though this program is focused on Africans in the diaspora, and I'm talking about specifically in the UK. We are a Pan-Africanist organisation, a Pan-African program. And there are conflicts and wars taking place in Ethiopia, Tigrayan people that we just can't cover it all, but we are aware. And I think it's just interesting to note how these kind of issues, like if this had happened in the UK, this would be all over the media, but we just aren't told about it. We really had to find it. So thank you, Brother Colin, for sharing that one with me. I was totally unaware. And so another story that is related to the kind of things that have been in the media, you probably know by now that COP26 has finished. So the political elite have made their bombastic statements about what they're going to do to save the planet. And of course, it's resulted in a whole load of nonsense, which is about kind of like slowing down and easing down and a transition towards sustainable fuel and getting rid of coal. Not really much different from COP25, 24, 23, 22, 21, 20, 19, 18, 17, 16, 15, 14, 20, and you get the point, and the same as which we're seeing 27. But one story that emerged over the last few days, which is very interesting, is the resurgence of this company called Desert Tech, which is based in Germany. And they've been at the forefront of what the EU is calling its hydrogen strategy, because they're recognizing that in trying to find a decarbonized fuel source, Africa is one of the key sources and key places to do this. We heard this discussion ages ago. Those of you who used to listen to the Ansapo program, we know we used to talk about what I call foreign investors trying to utilize solar energy in the Sahara to use as a pipeline to send power directly back to Europe. So I know it's a really bizarre one if you think about it. So you have the continent of Africa, you have solar panels invested in the Sahara, but the power is not going into the continent, which doesn't have nuclear fuel or doesn't have a sufficient fuel for the over 1 billion people that are living on the continent, but the cables will go under the ocean and back into Europe. So now they've redesigned this idea, and now they're talking about actually hydrogen is the key thing we can use, and we want to develop a hydrogen plant. And we reckon that, with this amount of investment, we can generate at least 15% of the power needs, or we can deliver 15% of the power needs of Europe. And so they're presenting it as a way of developing jobs and economic development and future proofing for people living in North Africa. But of course, we've seen this before, and it is in many ways, as one of the titles in the head paper you might see in the screenshot, is a new scramble for North Africa. And alongside it, if you can't see the text and everyone, it says Development for International Trade is to hold a virtual Africa Investment Conference. And this is going to take place in January 2020. What they're going to do is, again, talk about how when Boris Johnson was mayor of London, he had a project that kind of like talked about investing 80 billion pounds into the continent. We don't know what's happened with that. And now by doing this virtual conference in the new year, that there's opportunities to maybe, I'd say extract 26 billion from the continent, but they're going to say invest and work in partnership with. So I'm just saying this is a Pan-African view, something to look at. We don't really talk about these issues that much, but today's edition, we're kind of going to go across the globe, even though we're still going to retain our focus in the UK. Talking about the diaspora, one of the wonderful stories that's happening, and you'll probably know in a few days' time, I think it's on the 30th of November, which is the Barbados Independence Day. Well, that nation, that African nation, is set to become a republic, and that's a really, really important milestone. It's been a very, very long time. I can't express how I feel, how emotional I feel about the idea that I'm seeing another African nation take those steps towards becoming a republic and growing up out of this monarchical kind of like dictatorship, which is what it is. If you go onto the royal family website, you'll actually see that the British monarch is actually described as the Queen of Barbados. Even now, I mean, if you type in royal family, go to their website, type in Barbados, you'll see it. Queen Elizabeth is the Queen of Barbados. This in 2021 is a ridiculous state of affairs. So the fact that we have this amazing situation where, under the leadership of Prime Minister Mia Mottley, the island's going to swear in its first female, and that's a really big first as well, president as well, and that's Sandra Mason, and she was elected into Parliament in October. This is really a revolutionary step. Now, I know if you look into the media, you'll find that there are stories pushing back, like, why does Barbados have to do this now? Why can't it just wait for the monarch to die and then we can do it? It's never the right time. There wasn't enough consultation, blah, 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 blah. But you know what? There's always going to be people griping about what does it mean to actually, to kind of like remove a colonial power from the constitutional framework of a sovereign state. And it's really wonderful to hear that this is going to take place on the 30th, which is Barbados Independence Day. There are even people complaining, why is it taking place on Independence Day? Well, I think that this would actually be one of the first monikers of actually moving towards independence. Will it have political and economic repercussions? Perhaps, who knows, whatever. We'll solve it. One of the best things that I heard around this debate was that actually one of the things that the British monarch could have done if she was the Queen of Barbados, as it says on the royal family website today, and still now, when the Windsor scandal was taking place, she could have used her position as the head of the Commonwealth to say something. Now, I know, of course, there's this whole thing that monarchs don't say anything political and they're bound, but there wasn't an outcry from the royal family. There wasn't this kind of like pushback. There wasn't any kind of like indicator of disapproval. You heard about disapproval during Brexit. You heard about all these kind of like little nods and winks and things about how the royal family and the monarch felt about political issues that affected the ethnic majority in the UK. But there was nothing when it was affecting sort of African people who live in the UK and those from the diaspora. So this is a wonderful piece of news. And to be honest with you, I should have closed with this one because this is probably the best piece of news. Yeah, I should have closed with this. Unfortunately, I was just putting all the news stories together and I didn't have the time to really curate it in the way that I normally do. So that's the good piece of news. It only gets worse afterwards, I'm afraid. Remember, God, I just realised that even though the Zoom's on, but I'm not on the Zoom, so I can't see the chat, but you can always talk to us on the YouTube while Leander's listening and typing and responding as well. So thank you for being engaged. Ligali Live, 21st November 2021. Let me go to the next slide. And this one threw me. I mean, they all throw me. The 144 deaths in Sierra Leone, which I didn't know about. I was kind of like, when did this happen? And find out it was 2 weeks ago. I was like horrified. But this one, which happened a few days ago, in fact, it became public knowledge again a few days ago, but it happened, I think, a year ago. It's an awful, awful story. And this is the story of Agnes Wanjiru, who was a sex professional. She was a sex worker in Kenya, and they're using that to kind of like say that her life doesn't have any real value, which is something we had to really be careful for, that sex workers are human beings and they deserve no dignity and justice like anyone else. So it has no bearing on the situation. And this is the horrific case where actually British soldiers who were serving in Kenya, who were doing some work over there. They were on kind of like drinking culture kind of thing. One of the soldiers who went back after some time with some colleagues turned up, and to his friend, he said, "I've killed her." And he said, "What do you mean I've killed her?" They were on the site, and he took them to the place where he dumped her body, literally. This is a soldier from the Duke of Lancaster's regiment, and they saw her body was still there. And so what's happened, we now know that she was murdered by this British soldier in March 2012? I think it was 2012. I mean, now the body, because he acknowledged this and it's on social media, there's now an investigation by the military police. The body was taken out. It's been given a burial, but it's a very poor, impoverished burial. There's been no justice. The family are outraged. They don't know what to do. They want justice. They want the soldier to be reprimanded and to face the courts. We're still waiting to see what's going to happen with this. There's a news story on DW News on YouTube. If you type in at least 650 women, you'll find it brings up a story that talks about British troops who have alleged to have committed abuse over the recent decades. That's 650 African women by British who've been abused, raped, murdered in this case by British soldiers. And I raise this because those of you who know that when I was attacked for being or accused of being anti-Semitic, this was the work that Ligali does. We were looking into investigating war criminals and after war criminals. We were always looking at colonial crimes and times of that area in Kenya, ironically. To be honest with you, I really need to do something about finding more volunteers, because we need to investigate this. This is the sort of work that Ligali would be involved in, because when it goes into a military tribunal, when it goes into military investigators looking at these cases, we don't get justice. They just get a little slap on the wrist and nothing happens. Because we live here, and that's the reason why, some people, I think of it as a spiritual positioning, that, we're not here by accident. The ancestors placed us where we were supposed to be. Because we live here, we can demand an investigation. The same thing that I did with the war criminals, and I forced the British police to get involved and do the investigation. Now, they let the people that I had identified as war criminals pass away so they could escape justice. But in this case, the soldier is still alive. And he's made this confession, and they found the body. So I think that actually, I personally don't have the capacity right now, but the same thing, and I don't forget anything. So the same thing, I have to now find a volunteer who's going to find out all the names of Africans who are missing each week, because we need to have that. One of the things I dream of is, like, in a few months' time, when I'm doing this program, I have a list and photographs of the people the children, the families who are missing, so I can share that with our community and we can keep an eye out, because that's our job, to keep an eye on that. We also need investigators, journalists, writers, students, anyone who's got that capacity to kind of like also join with letter writing campaigns. And I'm happy to talk with you. You can come to my university, we can chat, and I can give you instructions and support you to do that. We need to follow up on cases like this. That's our job. There's a question. So do you know how many more African countries and islands left to become a republic, or where can we find that out? Oh, thank you. I don't actually. I think the last time a country became a republic was maybe around 10, 20 years ago. But I can look into that. And at the 30th will be what, in a week and a bit's time. So what I'll try and do is have the answer and a list of countries that have become republics, specifically those in the African diaspora. And so we can see what the trajectory is. So we know that even when countries have become independent or so-called independent, some of them have kept the colonial names. And we know that nations, like Jamaica, people talk about being independent, but then they don't go for that final straight, that final stage. So I'm really looking forward to hitting the 30th of November and seeing Barbados push it through, and hopefully that will send a cascading effect where other nations will get the courage to do the same thing. It's really important just to have the dignity to stand up, to follow in the footsteps of what our ancestors did in Haiti during 1791 to 1804 with the Haitian Revolution. So yeah, thank you for the question. How can we get in touch with you? Thank you. Another question. Email me, toyin@ligali.org. Thank you. Just an email, toyin@ligali, or just tell me what you're interested in, what part of the work campaign that you'd like to do. I am stretched capacity wise right now, and I've been told it's going to be like this probably for the next 6 to 7 months. And so like literally I've only reviewed all this news in the last hour and a half. I've just read everything, I've put it together. That's why the PowerPoint looks a little bit messy. I'm so sorry. I normally kind of like to have a little bit of an aesthetic sheen towards it. But just anything that anyone could do to help is useful. Ultimately, I won't even be presenting this. It will be people from the community, our family doing this. But I'm happy to do the analysis and do that work. So email me at toyin@ligali.org, or you can email me. It's t.agbetu@ucl.ac.uk, but that's the work email address. I am trying to make the two the same. I know it sounds strange, it's a bit risky, but that's my position. My life has to be about being in service to our community. So even when I'm working in the university and I'm teaching about nationalism, ethnicity, and race, which is what I do, and decolonizing anthropology, I teach about Pan-Africanism. I teach about these particular issues as well, and they have to be in sync, or what? There's no point in me working in any institution what's the point? So thank you for asking those questions. Just drop me an email. Email is probably the better way because I'm not very good on social media, and we'll take it from there. Thank you for asking. I'm going to go to the next slide. And this one is, I'm sorry to share the picture, I should have given a warning. This one is about, well, you can see what's happened. This woman has been jailed for I think it's 14 years. Is it 14 years? She's been jailed for 14 years for pouring acid over her boyfriend because she believed that he was having an intimate relationship with someone else. She was wrong, he wasn't. It's quite a horrific story. She's 28. She bought some sulfuric acid. She poured it on his chest while he was sleeping. That wasn't enough for her. He got up, something, he didn't feel right. He got on the sofa, and then she poured it on his face. She poured it on his chest again when he was sleeping. He knew something was wrong, the burning sensation. He asked her, can you help? She said she's called 999. She hadn't called 999. He said, call my family, call my friends. She blocked his family and friends from calling. She cancelled the taxi to take him to the hospital. And the worst thing, I say the worst thing on top of that, she offered him some tap water to drink, and saying that it would help him. The tap water was actually more sulfuric acid that she wanted him to drink. And so, I mean, you can see the disfigurement it's caused to him. So she has been jailed 14 years. He's been landed with a bill. He was from Ghana. He came to the UK with a bill for 40, I think it's £42,000. He has to pay in hospital fees. So he's worried that now he's going to have to be deported, and because he can't pay the bills, etc. It's a horrific story. And this happened inside our community. And again, she was wrong. I'm sorry for having to share that. I said it doesn't get better. It doesn't get better this week, but that's the news, unfortunately. This is a few days old. Where else happens? This one, I mean, my family knows this one because it makes me angry. I'll give you some context. Well, no, let me start with the story that's on the screen. We know that there's a Met officer who's facing gross misconduct after being investigated for using force on a teenage boy outside a secondary school in Wood Green. So the story is that there were 6 officers walking down the street. They saw a group of the young Africans by the school gates. They started interacting with them. Situation escalated. Then one of the officers tried to handcuff the boy, and he was taken to the ground, or he fell. They're not telling us which one it was. I suspect he was taken to the ground. And so now, in a rare situation, the IOPC, which is the Independent Office of Police Conduct, is actually saying that they think that he may be guilty of gross misconduct charges. It doesn't mean he will be found. It means that they're investigating it. The reason why it touches a heart with me this week is because on Tuesday, I was cycling on the way home. I had a particularly tough day at uni. I mean, great students, great lectures, a whole lot went brilliantly, but the day was just particularly stressful. So I was cycling home. I was like half an hour from home. I was passing the Britannia Centre, and then I saw 2 young children. That's what they were, 2 young boys. They were surrounded by 6 police officers. So you kind of like, I just want to get home. I had a throbbing headache, but I couldn't cycle past it. I stopped. I watched what was going on, because they were children. And when I say children, they were children. I'm talking about the youngest one looked like he was maybe between 12 and 14. The eldest one, I don't even think he was 15. He was a bit taller. And they were scared. They could have been my sons. They were scared. They were trying to give it bravado, but they were being polite. All I could hear, the elder one, like, "Why you got your hands at my bum cheek?" They were in handcuffs. They were petrified. The officers kept on saying, "Have you been in trouble with the police?" They said, "No, I've told you this 3 times. Why do you keep asking me if I've been in trouble with the police for? I just want to go home." I think they were siblings. I didn't film it because I don't film incidents with children. I'm very fussy about not putting children on the internet or social media, so I didn't film it, which kind of like, I have a bit of an angst about that. I kind of think I solved it because there's no evidence of what took place. They searched the boys. It was intrusive, usual stop and search. You had people walking by, looking at the children, and they were children, as if they had done something wrong. One of the officers came up to me, "Are you all right, sir?" And I said, "Well, why is there so many of you?" He goes, "Well, why are you being so negative?" I said, "What do you mean I'm being negative?" "Well, why do you say there's so many of us? There's only 6 of us. Why is that? Why do you think that's so much?" I said, "Look, you asked me from my guy, I answered the question. So what's happening?" He goes, "Well, there was an incident of violence in Hoxton, and everyone ran, and we followed these 2 who were running, and that's why we're searching them." And so I didn't intervene with the stop. I just observed the stop. I stood there. They eventually, after searching them, the boys called their mum. They kind of let them go. They took the handcuffs off. The boys were really, you could just hear it. If you're a parent, you'll understand that look in their eyes when they're saying, "Help me! What's going on? I don't know." And they're trying to pretend that they're cool, and they're actually petrified. They were saying, "Why do I have to give you my name? Why?" And one of the officers was saying, "Well, because you're minors, we don't know if you're missing," and blah blah blah. So they finally let them go. And then the senior officer came up to me and goes, "You all right, sir?" And I go, "No, I'm not all right." And he says, "Well, what do you mean you're not all right?" I said, "Well, why did you put them in cuffs for? They're children. What's that about?" He goes, "What do you mean?" It's like, there's been a lot of violent crime in the area. It's like, these children could have been, they could have been, carrying something. I need to get home to my family safely. I said, "Well, hold on, your job is to protect and serve. It's like they're children. Why? You didn't have to have them in handcuffs." I didn't see any kind of violence. I didn't see them resisting arrest or anything like that. He goes, "Well, look, you're a member of the public. If you saw what happened and you saw us running, you would have wanted to stop them." And I just realized one of the things I should have just said, and it hit me. They are members of the public. I said, "I am a member of the public," and I said, "I didn't want you to do that," but I said that I should have said, they are members of the public, because as children, they are members of the public. And it's more than that. They were innocent members of the public, because not only didn't have any weapons on them, didn't have any drugs on them, they hadn't been involved with the police. They were siblings. They're on their way home. They were detained for around 20 minutes in the cold. And it was freezing. I can't stress that enough. It was freezing, surrounded by 6 officers. They were searched with their hands up their bum creaks in public. They were harassed and made to feel like victims. And that's how you perpetuate this nightmare of distrust of a police force that is just acting like bullies, because that's what happened. The officer was a bully. Anyway, I'm sorry, I know I've got to go for the news. That's the reason why I said that this story triggered me a little bit. And I did went home. My poor son, he asked, "Dad, you okay?" I just tell him everything that happened, and I was really irate and throbbing headache. But he was really wise and really cool, and he helped me through it and stuff like. Because it could have been him. Do you know what I mean? He's 17, and my baby is 17. I still can't get over the fact that my baby is 17. It just sounds crazy. Where's the time gone? And then I started thinking, right, Toyn, what are you doing at university? It's like, I had this existential crisis. You're not supposed to be in an institution. You're supposed to be on the street helping our young people. And I did have that problem. And then a bit of sense came back in. Okay, Toyn, you're teaching, you're helping create new generations of anthropologists who are doing good work, who prevent this and help with this sort of stuff. And also, you're a thinker, you're a nerd, and you're proud of your nerd. How can you resolve this? And so yesterday I made a formal complaint to the Metropolitan Police. So that's gone inside the system. And so that means that they have to now find all the officers that were present. They have to go through all their notes. They can't delete the footage because some of them were filming it. And then I use the fact that they were filming it to also put out a subject access request. And this means that I'm asking for the video footage of myself in the incident. So that means, again, that even though I didn't film it, because they filmed me, with any luck, it should be that I should be able to get the footage of the incident, so they cannot sweep it under the carpet. And so hopefully the same thing that's happening with this officer in the news story facing a misconduct charge, we can actually see that happens with these officers. Now, these two children were not taken to the floor, but they were handcuffed, and it was unnecessary, and they were innocent. So I'm going to follow this up and see where it goes, and I'll feed back on it. But I just wanted to give you an outline that this is a live issue. Our children are being stopped, searched, and handcuffed on the streets outside school on the way home. That's happening today, 2021. And so the other images you'll see there is that there's a really powerful quote from Sister Yolanda, who's one of an amazing artists with a happy account, who's explaining why we must not stay silent on these kind of issues. It's so key. And you know what I mean? It's like they wrote an article. If you've got time, you can type into Google Hackney account, report on policing, and you'll find that they wrote a report on this particular issue exactly a year ago, and it's still going on. So I just wanted to go. There's a comment. Thank you, Orlando. Yes, spot on. So okay, yes, spot on with the subject access and spotlighting the bully police. I remember that. Yes, thank you. That's a really. It only came to me when I calmed down. If the things flash in red, they've got a retention policy. I can't remember if it's 14 or 21 days, and they'll delete it or they'll store it and you can't access it. So the key thing is, as soon as it happens, when you get that rage out of your system, write it down. Just write it down so it's fresh in your mind, everything that everyone said. And then what you can do is then make the complaint. And then if you haven't got the video footage, it's like make the subject access request. The subject access request is a pain. I had to take a photograph of my driving license and get a copy of, like a bank statement, all these kind of things to prove that I am who I am. But I did it. I did it all and that's what's made me late for work. It's just like, this is what people don't understand. You've got all these other responsibilities, just being a family man, you know what I mean? You kind of like keep everything together. And on top of this, just looking after your community. And I tell you the one thing that was satisfying though, and this is just the one thing that I like, that reminded me why I do what I do. When the second officer asked me, are you okay? And I said, no. The two young boys who were on their phone to their mother were about to leave because they just wanted to get home. They just felt humiliated. And then they stopped when they heard what I was saying. They stopped when I said, why were you handcuffing them? Why? And what happened, I can only imagine, I'm not psychic, but I can imagine that for them, there was a strange African who didn't know them, who was standing up for them. And I think it's really important that we remind our young people that we are on their side. it's so. I was at an event last night about for NME, who are having their, I think it's their 3rd anniversary. This is a No More Exclusions group, and it was an amazing event, and there's some amazing abolitionists inside that organization who are champion against abolishing exclusions. And there's a young person who had just come out of jail, literally came to the event, and he was talking about how NME helped save his life. And he said that he did some research while he was in jail. And like he just asked people on his wing, on his floor, there were 3 floors. He said he asked people on his floor, he sent a survey out to literally while in prison and said, how many of you have been excluded from education? And he said, I think it was 39 out of 40. It's like on 1 floor. That was the statistic. Everyone that was on his wing had been excluded out of education. And then there was a sister who said that not only does exclusion lead to the pipeline to prison and to criminality and all this kind of nonsense in the criminal justice system, but what people don't talk is about how exclusion from school also leads to mental health issues. And so, again, all these things are interrelated. Let me read the other message. We know the man you are. Oh, thank you. And I said before, that you, there is no me. Never second get yourself. Repeat. Thank you. It's difficult. Sometimes you're in a university. It's, what it is, and I won't go on about this. Now having a doctorate, so now I'm Dr. Toyne or Brother Dr. Toyne, whatever it is, and working at a university like UCL, all of a sudden I've become middle class, and I don't. That's it, and that I shouldn't be negative about it, but I don't have that sensitivity. I don't have that. I can't. I'm working class, if you want. I don't like labels, to be honest with you, but it's just very weird getting around that. And sometimes while I'm in the university, I meet other Africans that have doctorates and are like me and stuff like that. But we look at each other and we're well world apart. They don't like me. They see, I think Malcolm used to talk about the field Negro and the house Negro, and they see me and they're like, what's he doing in here? Oh my God, he's gonna expose us. It's like, and I can see they're just shuffling paper, not doing what they're supposed to be doing. And they can see me and they know that I ain't going to stand for that. So I've only been there for like a couple of months and I've already made enemies and people are being polite. So I guess I do second guess myself, because even though I've been made to feel welcome and I have wonderful colleagues and I love teaching. I'm enjoying kind of like teaching. I'm teaching under my own terms. I got the post without compromising. I still sometimes think, sometimes if I'm doing administrative work, which I'd rather be doing that for Ligali than for a university that's got billions of pounds, literally, in the bank. Let me move on. You're listening to Ligali Live, 21st of November, 2021. I think you're taking the place of my therapist, so thank you for putting up with me, and I want to continue with the news. I told you today's news is triggering. I should have ended with the story from Barbados, but that's how it goes. There's another message coming in. Black people can never agree, find it difficult to agree. Yeah, well, that's the thing, our diversity, it's beautiful. It means that we have different ideas. The Errol Dunkley, I always use the Errol Dunkley maxim, the tune, everyone does their way a little bit different. I'm cool with that. I like the fact that we all roll differently, but we've got to back each other when it comes down to the important things. That's the thing that I don't like, you know what I mean? It's like, I'm no enemy to our community. I'm no enemy to our people. I'm only an enemy to those that are doing badness and those that are holding us back. Those are the only people who need to be frightened of me. Anyone else, even if we don't get on, even if I don't agree with you, I'm not going to harm you because I don't believe in that. You know what I mean? It's only if you are harming us, then I will stop you. That's the only time. You don't have nothing to fear from me. But yeah, there we go. The bougie class, and now I remember the bougie class because I can't even figure it out yet. Anyway, let's move on. Where are we? Okay, so why does all this matter? Why am I going on about the police? Why am I going about stop and search and stuff like that? Because things have not changed. I don't know if you can see the image of this guy, PC Jamie Rayner. Well, he was having a relationship with a junior officer and he throttled her. He abused her, physically assaulted her. And, this is a police officer. His colleague was a police officer. He told her to lie about it when he was being investigated about the situation. I think he's got 2 years sentence now. So, that's good. But this wouldn't have happened without all the focus on the Sarah Everard situation. You can see on the right, there's a story about a West Yorkshire police officer who was using a chokehold, and he was putting his knee and his body weight on a young man called Hassan Ahmed in Halifax, and his exact words were, "Chill out, or I'll choke you out." That's what he said. chill out or I will choke you out. And this just happened. This is coming up now because the investigation is taking place now. And he denies that he used disproportionate force. But this happened straight after George Floyd. And even his colleagues were saying, man, do you just see what's happening in America? This is British policing today. So I just kind of like want you to get the context that this is not just something that's just happening to our children, to African people. This is still happening to women. This is still happening to people based on their physicality, on whether they're Muslims, whether or any kind of level of arbitrary discrimination is taking place. So what can be done about it? Well, a lot has to be done about it. But one of the first things we need to do is, when we go back, is recognize that the vetting system that the police are using to allow people into the force is not working. Because if you can see, again, this is a story from 3 days ago, a serving police officer has actually appeared in a court in Petersburg, and he's been charged with raping a child. And when I say raping, I mean, this is a police officer. Yeah. 15th of November. What is it? It's the 21st. That's just 7 days ago, the court case. So this is a real issue. And then when we talk about vetting police officers, well, what we know now, the BBC did an investigation, is that there are around 2,500 police officers who actually don't have appropriate level of vetting. And so is it any wonder that we're having this kind of like constant drip feed of people who are criminals inside the police force? And then when you have a corrupt system that doesn't investigate them properly, then what happens is that you just don't have justice. You don't have a society that is actually safe for people who are not part of team whiteness. So yeah, that's why I'm sharing all this stuff. So we've had a lot of discussions recently about racism. Let me go to the next door. I think it's slide didn't turn. And there's a really good article inside The Guardian that actually just really makes it clear that all the testimony, all the tears, all the angst that we're seeing in national media about Azeem Rafiq's testimony. This is the cricketer, who I think I spoke about this 2 weeks ago, who talked about horrific levels of racism or racial abuse and slurs being used in the cricket club, youth cricket club, that they shouldn't just be limited to cricket, and they should be used really to look at and investigate the problems in every workplace, because these conditions exist in every workplace. There's the French, I think it's a French footballer. I'm not really up to it with French footballers, but I think it's a French footballer, Laurent Ferran. He says that Gareth Southgate, he's the English manager. I think he's an amazing example of what he was doing during Euro 2020 with his statements, his support for his players. He sets a really good example of what Europeans could be doing and what allyship really means. And it's really interesting, this story, because now we now know that Azeem Rafiq actually sent out tweets that were anti-Semitic when he was around 19 years old, and he's apologized for them. I mean, and I should say that he's actually come out and just owned them, apologized for them, which is the right thing to do straight away. But some people have tried to use that to derail the topic and investigation into racism in the workplace, and that can never happen. That it's one of those problems that are still enduring. There's still institutional racism, systemic racism, whatever you want to call it. It still exists. It still persists, and it still causes harm to the lives and to the well-being of many people of African, Asian, and other minority ethnic heritage in the UK. So, what's happening over the pond? Well, another triggering story. This is the story of Carl Rittenhouse. And again, I find it really amazing when there are stories I know that are huge in America and there's almost nothing about them in the UK. Just a couple of 3-minute segments and stories and going on. When I know that there are protests, it's on every channel, and we're not hearing anything about it. Because in America, I don't even remember that there was this anti-racist rally that took place during lockdown. And Carl Rittenhouse was the young Euro-American boy who decided that he was going to take a machine gun and go across the state. So, he left where he lived and went to another state, and he was going to go and challenge the protesters who were fighting against racism. Now, this has got nothing to do with the issue of the people he murdered, and he did murder them as far as I'm concerned. The people he murdered were European. They were moral people, and dealing with protests and anti-racism, and he killed them. And one of the stories that one of the facts that I think it's not useful for the liberal media to leave out is that, from what I heard, is that there was some testimony that one of the suspects, or not one of the suspects, one of the people who were murdered actually did point a weapon or something at him. So he's saying he was frightened for his life, and that's why he killed the two people and injured a third. And I think now, I'm not in the court case. I wasn't in the courtroom. I haven't heard all the testimony, but I think there's something premeditated about a young boy leaving with an AR-15 assault rifle from his home, traveling across state to go to an anti-racist protest, who's actually made a statement in the past, because this was actually was made inadmissible in court. There's a video of him saying that he saw a protest, an anti-racist protest, and he said, if I was there, I'd go there with my gun and shoot him or something like that. And that wasn't allowed for the jury to hear that. So he made the statement beforehand, and then he actually followed through on what he said he was going to do. And he's been completely acquitted. The judge is saying, yeah, amazing jury, you did a fantastic job. The former president-in-chief, that redneck called President Trump, is saying that's justice. Even Joe Biden is saying, we have to trust the jury. The jury made the right decision. I think he tried to avoid saying that. We have to trust the system of the jury. They made a decision. We support them. Rah, 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 rah. But what we're seeing here, and then just to icing on the cake, there's a particular gun rights organization who's saying, you know what, Kyle, you're such a good example for Americans. We're going to award you with an AR-15 style rifle following your acquittal as a gift. And so you've got people going, yay, thank you, Rittenhouse. And there's a movement following behind this young man who actually went out with a gun, crossed the state, and murdered innocent people engaged in protests. He's been completely acquitted. This is the power of white privilege. This is why it's being played out. And we don't hear these stories in the UK because it's a pretense that it's not real, that this level of privilege doesn't exist, but it is real. Who remembers Trayvon Martin? And he was murdered for having Skittles. He was walking with Skittles. It was the hoodie that was his badge assigned. We already are currently watching the trial of Ahmed Arbery. And I apologize if I pronounced his name wrong. And this is an African who was jogging. And again, the same level of vigilantism. Groups who, and I think I spoke about this at the last broadcast. Same level of vigilante. We have people going out with guns, murdering an African in this particular case. And the jury, we know now, is I think 11 people are Europe. There's only one African, I suppose African, because actually when they say people of color in America, I don't even know what they're talking about. So when they say people of color, they say one person of color on the jury, despite there being several African Americans who actually went up to be on the jury. So this system of privilege and white supremacy is real. And we need to know about these stories, even though they happen in America, because what happens in America is actually often copied here, maybe 2 or 3 years later. This is a message. Okay, thank you. What's that machine gun? Yeah, AR-15 style machine gun. Their law always confuses me. Their abortion laws and their gun laws. This is the definition of insanity. Yeah, I think you're right. Thank you both of you. I think you're totally right. I think we sometimes confuse the fact that just because something's legal doesn't make it moral. And this is the problem that we're stuck with, that too many people think, well, the legal system said that he's innocent, so therefore he must be innocent. That's not a moral judgment, because anyone who leaves with the intention to hurt someone with a gun and actually does intend hurting someone, well, they've committed murder, whether you call it reckless homicide or intentional or first-degree intentional homicide, or whatever you want to call it, reckless endangerment. He shouldn't be acquitted of all. He was acquitted of all those charges, not even reckless endangerment. How could that be? How could you, if I went on the street with a gun and then I shot someone who I thought was a threat to my life, actually just me going on the street with a gun is reckless, and I endangered someone's life, and I enacted that danger by killing them. But insanity, yeah, there we go. We go to the next story. Oh, okay, that one is still there from last week. Okay, well, it was a good news story. I don't know how that one stayed inside there. That was a mistake, but that's good. If you didn't see the last broadcast, this was about an advert that was targeting women and girls with natural hair. And it's the first of what many people hope is going to be a long chain of adverts that leans into our cultural heritage, our beauty, without compromise. And the advert was made by Afrocentric, and I think I said last week, the sister who runs that actually comes from the same department that I actually work out. So yeah, hey, yeah, she's an anthropologist. Excellent. Oh, okay. I'm not going to read all the stories. I think somehow the slides have, oh, because there are some other stories I need to, I'll read this one and I'm going to go on and see the other slides are there. You know what? It's because I was rushing it all together. I might have missed one. This one is about the renaming of the formal garden that was named after the slaver. I'm not going to say its name, and it's now been renamed the Kit Crowley Gardens. A lovely event. I wasn't able to attend, but it's a really important progress. In fact, what I can talk about, which isn't on the slides, there we go. There's a piece of interesting news. I want to say good news here. I like actions more than words. The Jeffrey Museum, that's the site they call the Museum of the Home, has actually indicated that it's now considering, and it's more likely that it's going to remove the Jeffrey symbol, that's the statue, from the public realm, the front of the building, and place it somewhere inside and not in such a prominent position with text interpreting it. And that is actually movement. It hasn't done it yet. This is a statement that's come from the trustees. And yeah, I should have actually put this on here. I totally forgot that. I hope they do it. That's the right thing to do. I just can't get excited about it because they're not to be trusted. They did a public consultation. The public said, get rid of the statue. And they decided to actually overturn the decision of the public. So now that after a year and a half of people kind of like, slagging them off and kind of like deciding to boycott them and protest outside them, that they're actually doing the right thing. And of course, there's been a lot of good people who have been campaigning and challenging them and joining the trustee or trying to join the trustee board to change its composition. This is welcome news, but like I said, actions speak louder than words. So let's see what happens. Okay, and so that's the last slide, which is a bit shame because there were more stories. I'm just trying to think, what were the last couple of stories? I can't remember what the last couple of stories were. That's bizarre. I'm just trying to remember that. My memory is not always that good, but I'll leave it there. I don't know how long we've been going for, and that was a really bizarre one. I think it didn't save the last few slides, and I'm just so gnashed and knackered. I can't actually remember what the stories were. We'll leave it there. I know I was going to talk about there's I think it was Denmark where the police came out in protest. There's basically protests against a lockdown that's going to be taking place, and so people are really upset, and so it looks like there's a fourth lockdown on its way to Europe. Doesn't look like it's quite reaching the UK yet, but people are starting to get really scared about that. But I can leave it there. Is any questions? Nah, you know what? Just leave it there. Thank you for joining us, and I shall see you in a couple of weeks' time. And as ever, may the ancestors continue to guide and protect us. Ashe.